Welcome to my third video on MATLAB Projects. If you missed either the first or the second, there's some links here in the video and you can jump back and have a look at them. But what we're here today for is we're here to talk about a way that I've found works really well for me, and I templatize some standard folders when I set up a clean project. So I'll just work through them as we can go. A few things to remind: we can see these grey folder labels are on the path and solid black lines are on the path. So having a look at the app folder first, which is off the path, I generally don't put anything in an app folder because what I put in here is I put generated. So if I'm compiling an app or if I'm generating source code, I'll put it into that output location. It's not on the path because I don't want to accidentally work with anything in there. I want that to all be product. So all automated generated, the rest of my code in my models and my source folder is the golden reference. Next up is data. Now data can be either on the path or off the path. I default to off as an easier way. But what I do in data is I put in there things that I want to contain with the project and move with it, but that is data objects. It will be in Git or my source control management for this, anything that's put in data. So bear in mind it's a conceptual decision as to whether it go in here and be contained with the project or whether the data should live separate from the source code. Next up is model. Now you can see model is on the path. I use model as a container structure for all my Simulink models, my stateflow models, my sim events models, my Simscape and Simscape multibody models go into the model folder. Next up off the path is sandbox. Now sandbox I use literally as a sandbox. It's a play pit I can use there for developing ideas, scratch pad type concept where I want to rough something out. The advantage of having this sandbox inside my project but off my path is it can see all my models, it can see all my source code and all my utilities, so I can use it for testing and debugging ideas. I generally leave sandbox off the path because I don't want sandbox to be polluted in any of my tests or source. It's a scratch space. Next up is shortcuts. Shortcuts are where I have project-specific utilities. So in the projects ribbon, I can have a project shortcut to execute particular tasks. I also put in here, I haven't got it templated in this case, but I also put in my project startup and project shutdown scripts into this location. Next is source. This is where I put my MATLAB source code, be it scripts, functions, and classes. They all go into here and they are generally would be on the path. Next up is tests. Tests is off the path. This is where I put all my unit testing, all my foundations of my continuous integration, continuous deployment. It goes inside tests. They would usually match a folder structure with source and model. And finally, on the path is utils. I'll talk a bit about them later, but these are where I put standard utilities that I roll with my projects. These would generally not be compiled into any output. They're just sort of some enhancements to a project. Okay, so what does that look like in practice with a more complex project? Well, here is a project where I've got a lot of source code and a lot of different models. So let's walk through this. First of all, you can see data is on the path because I'm using some data. In this case, I want it to be available on the path. It's in my source control and I want it to move with the project. In this case, I have an additional library block. Now I create the library folder here where I'm using something like a Simulink data dictionary or some reference images that I'm going to use across models or across the entire project. So conceptually, it is like a library. It's an asset that's going to be used across the project that is not a model per se. So here we can see the model. I have a very lean structure in this case, so I only have one folder. They're just 4 different models, so that's pretty simple. Sandbox, I've got some working in the sandbox. Again, we can see not on the path because I don't want that to pollute anything. Shortcuts, still only got the project startup here. And then I get over into source. So source, I now actually have some different namespaces and I have some different classes rolled into this. So I'm segmenting my code into different namespaces. So the plus is a namespace for logistics blocks in this case, or I have some classes here for vehicle data. Now the interesting part to note is when I go over to my test folder, I tend to mirror my source tree in my test tree. So it's very easy to see, okay, so I have a vehicle data folder namespace in my source, and I also have a vehicle data test and an EV vehicle test, which maps into the classes that I'm building in there. Utilities is my same standard utilities. I'm going to talk about them in a future video. And I have an additional folder here that I wanted to bring with the project. This was some vehicle specifications. So this was an electric mining project where we were bringing some vehicle specs across. So this was a data sheet reference. This could have also gone into library. There's no perfect way out. Just stick with what mostly works for you in that way. So that's it. That's a standard folder layout that I use for my projects. Stay with me for the next video in this series coming up soon, which is going to talk about some of these utilities in detail.